Yes, that's also spirituality. True. Thank you. Yes, it is spirituality is devotion to God. Okay. Yes, definitely. You could say that is we'll talk about how that is in one sense the most evolved understanding of spirituality. There are many layers to spirituality, and devotion to God is on the higher layers. Yes. Yeah. Remembering to exist as a soul. Remembering our identity as a soul. Yes, that is being spiritual means remembering that we ourselves are spiritual. Yes, thank you. Too. Yes. So today I'm remembering our connection to consciousness with ourselves. So reconnecting with ourselves. Yeah, it's remembering our connection with ourselves. We remember our connection with the world. We remember our connection with people quite a bit. It's like, oh, everybody is interested in the news. What happened here? What happened there? What happened there? But there's a lot of news in our inner world, which we are often unaware of. So, staying aware of the inner dynamics and stay connected with ourselves. Yes, thank you. It's beautiful. Any other answer? So, thank you. So, all these answers are are all valid and all very important aspects. So, broadly, spirituality can be understood in three ways. Now, this will include what you're talking about. If we consider that spirituality is a level of reality, it is a state of awareness, and it is a set of actions. So, to understand this, let's consider that we'll take one metaphor which I'll keep coming back throughout the talk. That metaphor is the metaphor of climbing up a mountain. So, we can say the bottom of the mountain is self centeredness, where a person is always thinking about my desires, my pleasures, myself. So many people, they are eye specialists, not eye specialists, but eye specialists, self-centered. We all are sometimes like that. So the bottom of the mountain is self-centeredness. At the top of the mountain is selflessness, where we think of something bigger than ourselves. We are devoted to something higher than ourselves. Our life is about not about it's, certainly we are aware of ourselves, but we are also aware of a cause bigger than ourselves. So we could say the bottom of the mountain is material consciousness. The top of the mountain is spiritual consciousness. So now that what you talked about level of reality. So that at the top, so if you can say two levels of reality, there's spiritual reality is material reality. And when our consciousness rises from material reality to spiritual reality, that is spiritual consciousness. That is one way of understanding spirituality. Now, another way of understanding spirituality is that it is the tools that help us climb up the mountain. So, the practices that we have. So, that I'm at the bottom of the mountain, if I'm taking a particular path up the mountain, then maybe this path is rocky, then maybe I need a supporting stick. Maybe the path I'm taking up is marshy. Then maybe I need some other kind of equipment to pull myself out, not get stuck. So the process, the tools, the equipment the training that I need to go up that path, that is also spirituality. So when people talk about this is my spirituality, like we say that I sit and meditate, or I sit and do some deep breathing, I commune with nature. When people talk, people have very different ideas of spirituality. But their idea is essentially this is what helps me feel connected. This is what helps me become centered. This helps me get my awareness to a higher plane. It is not that everything that everyone claims to be spiritual is necessarily spiritual. It's not that every path from the bottom of the mountain is going to go up the mountain. But there can be different paths. The point is to go up the mountain. So spirituality can refer to a level of reality. Spirituality can refer to the practices that can take us to that level of reality. And this is spirituality is not just a physical journey. It is more a journey of our awareness, of our consciousness. So in one sense, it is a state of awareness. So when I say that I'm going from the bottom of the mountain, top of the mountain, it can have certain external changes, but the more important is the inner change. So the state of awareness, a level of reality, and a set of practices that can foster that state of awareness and take us to that level of reality. So all these three are, they comprise spirituality. And so the idea is that there can be different parts of the mountain, and that is why there could be different spiritual traditions, there could be different people, different spiritual teachers, there could be different spiritual texts. So spirituality is not a no teacher, no tradition has a monopoly on spirituality. At the same time, just because there's no monopoly, that doesn't mean that everything that everyone claims is spiritual is necessarily spiritual. It's not that it's not that all paths from the bottom of the mountain will take us to the top of the mountain. Some may just take us round and round the mountains. Some may take us away from the mountain into the valley also. So how do we know which paths are taking us upward? That is what? If our spiritual practices are making us less self-centered, if they are making us more aware of realities bigger than ourselves. Now there is a paradox over here. There are two words. I'll speak those two, or one word and one phrase, or two phrases, let's put it. Then you can try to tell me what is the difference between the two. So being self-conscious and being conscious of the self. Are the two the same? Being self-conscious and being conscious of the self. What is the difference?
Consciousness is like ego, false ego.
It is the first, being self-conscious. So it's the consciousness is about one's ego. Okay, and conscious of the self is
Being aware of the true identity.
being aware of the true identity. Yes. See, if we are self-conscious, it's like suppose somebody is speaking in public for the first time. Then they're very self-conscious. What are people thinking about me? Are people laughing at me? Are people neglecting me? So if a person is too self-conscious, then they can't function actually, isn't it? So self-consciousness is almost, we can say that a person has a mirror. Now it is important, if you are going out, you want to be presentable. So it's useful to have a mirror to look at ourselves. But a person who is self-conscious is like a person who spends their life looking at a mirror. They don't stop looking at the mirror. So we want to be conscious of the self. That means we need to be aware of ourselves. But we don't want our consciousness to be trapped in the self. So I want to be aware of my emotions, my interests, my priorities. But after I become aware of those, I want to act on those things. So being self-conscious is not very healthy. Being self-conscious inhibits us. Whereas the opposite of being self-conscious is not, it is not being conscious of the self, it is being self-unconscious. And that is also not very healthy. When we're self-unconscious, we are not even aware what we are doing. Like sometimes people, when they're very bored with life, they just start mindlessly surfing the net or just watching TV. And then if somebody from it comes, what are you watching? Actually, I don't know what I'm watching. I'm just watching. It's like they're so bored, it's so mindless. Whatever is going on, you watch it. So if I endlessly keep surfing, sometimes we just click one post, maybe Facebook, one video, second video. And maybe after the hour, we look back and say, I look at 50 videos. What do I remember? Nothing. So being unconscious of the self is like being absent-minded. We can't function effectively. So if you consider pendulum, one side of the pendulum will be being self-conscious. And that will inhibit us. But being unconscious of the self will actually not be beneficial because we are oblivious. We will be unproductive. So in between is being conscious of the self. That is, okay, I'm aware of where I am, what I am doing, and I'm aware of that so that I can do what I'm doing more effectively. So spirituality in that sense has these two aspects. We become conscious of the self, and we become conscious of a reality bigger than the self. And these two go together. And that's why when you talk about spirituality as devotion to God, there are many different levels of reality in the world. And say if somebody loves painting, somebody loves gardening. Now for many people, when they're painting something or they're gardening, they feel a great sense of peace. They feel a sense of they're experiencing something very special. So what is happening is the spiritual reality is not just isolated from material reality. Spiritual reality like creeps in through various channels. We all get experience of the spiritual in different ways. So when we get this experience, we long for more of it. So suppose somebody goes for a nature trek. Now what happens is, as compared to the fast-paced nature of city life, going to close to nature, just seeing the sky, seeing the trees, seeing the birds, it calms us. It makes us aware of realities bigger than ourselves. So now that may or may not be intrinsically spiritual. It depends, but it can point us toward the spiritual. So when you talk about going up the mountain, the one aspect of it is that I become conscious. Okay, this is where I am, and that is where I want to go. That is the reality I want to achieve. So spirituality is about becoming conscious of ourselves and conscious of a reality bigger than ourselves. And then there are various levels of reality. The biggest reality is the ultimate reality, which in the Bhakti tradition is known as Krishna. So when we talk about spirituality, the essence can be boiled down to these three things. That I started off with talking about how it's a level of reality, it's a state of awareness, and it's the practices that help us to attain that state of awareness. So this in the Bhakti tradition is the three Sanskrit words used to refer it. It's called Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojan. So without getting into the technicalities of the words, the idea is that what is it that I am relating with? That's Sambandha. What is the process for relating with it? And what is the fruit of relating with it? So in one sense, this threefold dynamic is there in everything. Say suppose we see an ad of a new phone, hmm, and maybe which is the latest iPhone is iPhone 11, 14. Oh, okay. I live in the Stone Age, it seems. I guess I live in the Stone Age anyway. Okay, iPhone 14. So, okay, so latest we see the latest iPhone and we see it, hey, I want to buy it. So, okay, I want to establish a relationship with the iPhone. So that is the object with which I want to relate. And what is the process? Okay, maybe I have money in the bank, I will withdraw it, or I'll plan some installment scheme, or I will have to work more to get money, or I have to borrow some money from somewhere. That's the process. And then I buy the iPhone. And when I buy the iPhone and I parade it to all my friends and I put it on Facebook and I show it on Instagram and I feel so happy. The happiness is the experience I want, the sense of the pride of ownership, the happiness of ownership. So, in one sense, these three are there in everything that we do. So, it may be a relationship. You find some person attractive, you want to develop a relationship with them, and we expect. So, there's a process for developing the relationship, and then ultimately we expect happiness to that relationship. So, similarly, the same three apply to spiritual reality. So, in spirituality, there are many specific practices. There are many specific philosophical details. There are many specifics which have their own importance. But the purpose of the specifics is ultimately to help us understand what I want to relate with, how I want to relate with, and what is the fruit of that relationship. So in Bhakti spirituality, we start with understanding that the highest reality is an all attractive, loving divinity. And that divinity, as I said, is known by name Krishna. And then how do I relate with that divinity? That is by certain practices. Like we chant the holy names, we worship the embodied manifestation of the Lord, the deities. We study wisdom texts. We associate with those who are spiritually minded. So like that, these are practices. So we generally call them as A, B, C, D. A is the association, B is the study of books, C is the chanting of the holy names, and D is the worship of the deities. So these are the process. And the result is what? The result is we experience a higher joy. And a higher joy, a higher fulfillment. And that fulfillment is so great. It is a bhakti pareshanubhava virakti rajita. The experience of God is so enriching. The experience of the spiritual is so fulfilling that our craving for other experiences dies down. Oh, I want to watch this movie. I want to eat this food. I want to do this. I want to do that. It is not that we can't do those things. It is that the craving for those will no longer control us. Virakti Ranyatracha. And this, we could say, is spirituality in a nutshell. That we, so when we are going through our, whatever we are doing in our spiritual journey, what is it that I want to relate with? What are the practices that I can do to relate with it? And then what is the result that I experience by relating with it? So if these three are clear for us, the purpose, so you could say the purpose, the process, and the experience, the result. These three are the essence of spirituality. And once we get this clear, then various details, how specifically I follow which detail, that is something which every individual can negotiate. So I'll conclude with one point and then we can have a few questions. In the Gita, Krishna has a very remarkable statement. Mama vartamanu vartante manushyaha partha sarvashaha. He says, all living beings are on my path. Now, there are some religious traditions which are exclusivist. They say, my way is the only way. That only when you follow this particular path, you'll go back to, you'll attain God, you'll attain the ultimate reality. So that is, you could say it's intellectual, it's ideological, that's exclusivism. And then there are some people who are not just in ideology exclusivist, they bring the translate into action. So exclusivism starts a slippery slope from which you can come down to extremism. So exclusivism say if you're not following this path, you're going to go to hell. Extremists say not only are you going to go to hell, we'll help you get there faster. So this kind of claiming monopoly on God, claiming so it is that is not spiritual, although a person may think they are spiritual. So what Krishna is saying is that everyone is on my path. What does that mean? That means that everybody is in one sense searching for a better life. Everybody is searching for higher experiences. Now, some people may think that their higher experiences, they will experience something wonderful through drinking. Somebody may think that I'll experience something better through drugs. Somebody may think I'll experience something higher through sensual pleasure. Whatever it is, we are all looking for experience. But all experiences, they culminate in the experience of Krishna. That's why when he says all people are on my path, this is a very inclusive statement. So the mood of the Gita and the mood of the Bhakti tradition is, you can say, from your place, at your pace, access divine grace. So from your place, at your pace, access divine grace. That is 411 in the Bhagavad Gita. So I'll summarize. I spoke mainly 3 points. I talked about what is spirituality. All of you contributed nicely. And I said that spirituality can, broadly, if you consider the mountain metaphor, it is the peak of the mountain, from bottom of the mountain, self-centeredness to selflessness. And it is also the process by which you go up the mountain. And it is also the awareness of, because it's not a physical journey, it is a journey of our consciousness. It is the awareness by which we are going up this mountain. And then in that connection, I talked about spirituality as, when we are talking about spirituality, what does it involve? It involves a purpose, a process, and an experience. So it may be even relating with someone, by relating with an object, relating with a person, it could be relating with the ultimate reality. So the object the purpose sambandha is related to the ultimate reality Krishna. The process is the practices of bhakti, ABCD, and the experience that results is an inner enrichment that frees us from outer cravings. And for this journey, it is not an exclusivist, leave alone extremist. It is a very inclusivist. From wherever we are, at whatever pace is comfortable for us, we can access divine grace. Thank you. Hare Krishna. So, are there any reflections, questions? Yes, please.
Is the traditional yoga be able to cross with temple alone, chances, but what would you recommend for someone who just began consciousness, doesn't have to access to temple? What the person can start with to
Okay. So, what can we start with if somebody doesn't have access to the temple? Well, bhakti is very versatile. There are many limbs in bhakti. We talked about chanting of the holy names. So basically, we can look at the circle of things that we like to do. That's one circle. Other circle of things is the circle of things that comprise bhakti. I talked about 4 main elements, but there are many other ways in which you can practice bhakti. So we find these two circles and find the intersection between them. So suppose I like music, and bhakti involves music. There's so much spiritual music. So I can start with something which is the intersection of these two. Something which I like to do and something which is spiritual. So when we start at this level, then it is easy because I already like to do that. And then, of course, there are some things in bhakti which we may not feel immediately attracted to. Those we may need to do as a discipline. And those we can do, we can take up as our conviction increases. As we experience something higher, we experience some transformation, we experience some peace, we experience some clarity. Then we can take up other limbs also. So one of the most accessible limbs of bhakti is the holy name. So wherever we are, it is, if you can say, one of the ways of one of the ways phrasing it is the holy name is like portable divinity. It's the divine in the form of sound, and that form of the divine as sound goes with us wherever we are. So that's one way of one very easy and universal way of accessing the divine. So this process is called as sonic meditation. It is sonic is sound meditation. So we use sound as an aid for meditating. So taking the example of the mountain metaphor. So it's like the mantra, as we chant the mantra, the mantra is entering into our consciousness, but the mantra is also the divine. So we are entering into the divine. Our consciousness is entering into the mantra. So the mantra enters into our consciousness, and our consciousness enters into mantra. In that sense, the mantra is like an elevator. And when we enter into it, the elevator moves up. So as we keep chanting the holy names, we'll find that our consciousness will rise upwards. Okay. Any other questions, comments? Yes, please.
Occupancy practice some time. What are the measures or signs signals to sort of help you realize that you are making good progress?
Okay. So, what are the signs that we are growing spiritually? Well, generally they fall in two categories. Say, yeah, at the bottom of the mountain, we are trying to go to the top of the mountain. Now, generally, if we are at a greater height, we can see things more clearly. If I'm at the ground level, I just see everything, but I can see above, okay, this person is here, this place is here, this place here. Generally, all maps of countries, they're drawn from the top view. So one of the signs of spiritual growth is clarity. It's both inner clarity, outer clarity. So prakash is the Sanskrit word used for it. That we will start finding that as our consciousness becomes more spiritual, we will start understanding ourselves better. So we will start seeing our urges. Say we may have the urge of anger, we may have jealousy, we may have craving. So when they start coming, we shall start becoming more aware of them. And then, in one sense, awareness is the first requirement for transformation. So this awareness, we try to consciously increase it. We try to in spirituality, we try to consciously be aware, but simultaneously, the awareness will automatically increase, and we will catch ourselves whenever we are about to do something which is unworthy, which is improper. We'll catch us. Hey, we shouldn't be doing this. We really need to do this, and it won't be so much of a compulsion, like somebody externally imposing us, don't do this. It'll be self-awareness. Maybe this is not worthwhile. It's unproductive. So that increased awareness of ourselves, our emotions, our actions, that can help us a lot in further self-transformation. So that's one thing we can see. Our awareness of ourselves becomes higher. We get greater clarity. And then as the clarity moves ahead, then from clarity, two things will happen. There'll be simplicity and there'll be purity. Simplicity means that, okay, I have these 25 things in my life. Do I need all these 25 things? Maybe these are not really that required. Yeah, maybe instead of having 25, I can do with 20. Maybe I can do with 50. So we'll be able to simplify our life. And this simplicity will not come with a sense of loss. It will come with a sense of freedom. I don't need so many things. So that is a second result, simplicity. And then third is purity. Now, purity here means that just as simplicity means externally, we give up the things which are not important for us. Internally, we all have emotions, desires, thoughts, which are which are we could say unworthy of us. We have petty, we sometimes hold petty grudges, we sometimes are judgmental, we keep our biases. So we'll find that those will start decreasing. So we'll stop seeing purity means in general, we could say the broad difference between purity and impurity is that when there is impurity, when I interact with someone, my first thought is, what can this person do for me? When there is purity, my first thought is, what can I do for this person? So we can say in relationships, one of the main one reason why relationships collapses because the other person feels objectified. I'm just being treated as an object to be used for the other person's pleasure. So that when people start feeling like that, they feel unwanted, unvalued, and then their relationship breaks. So purity means our interactions with others are not so self-centered. So we will find that. So clarity, simplicity, and purity. These three things will naturally happen as we grow spiritually. Okay. Thank you. Yes, please.
With purity and how it's the thought of how can I serve others or how can I help others. From my experience, I've found that it's very easy to also lose yourself and giving to others.
Yes.
And there's that like reciprocity. So what would you say around the difference between that and true purity?
Yes, thank you. So I was hoping somebody will ask that question. That sometimes in the name of purity, in the name of giving ourselves to others, we may lose ourselves. So there is a difference over here. See, there are some people who are almost compulsive people pleasers. Hmm? There are various forms of addiction. Maybe the substance addiction is like somebody is addicted to alcohol or something like that. But there is a subtler, something like approval addiction. Like I always want the approval of everyone else. And now that is impossible. We will never be able to please everyone, no matter what we do in our life. So that's why when we talk about what can I do for the other person, that does not necessarily mean I will do whatever the other person wants me to do. We have our intelligence. We understand what is good for the other person. We also understand what is good for us. So when I say what can I do for the other person, it is a question which is asked with wisdom. So if the other person wants me to do something which is harmful for them or harmful for me, then we will say no to that. Because in one sense, our path is we want to rise to a higher consciousness. So if somebody wants me to do something which is dragging me away from the activity that will raise my consciousness, then we will say no to it. But our purpose is not saying no to that person primarily. Our purpose is that this is what I want to do, and this is not helping me. So this is not selfishness. See, it is like a doctor. Mm. A doctor may have 1,000 patients to take care of. A doctor has the capacity to take care of maybe 25 patients. After, doctor has to say enough. I want to take care of others, but if I don't take care of myself, then they can give wrong prescriptions, they can medical mistakes. So the idea is that spirituality means respecting and caring for everyone, but everyone includes ourselves. So if we care for others so much that we don't care for ourselves, then we are not being spiritual. So we could say that there are two ways of being anti-spiritual. That's why I said being self-conscious and being self-unconscious. So I think only about myself, that is not being spiritual. I never think about myself. That is also actually not being spiritual. Because the body mind is like a machine we have been given. And the divine God Krishna has given us this machine, and we are meant to use it responsibly. If we overwork it, then we are not being conscious of the fact that this is also our responsibility to take care of. Yeah, thank you. Good question. Yes, please.
How do you balance spiritual life and material life?
Okay, yeah, very important question. So, how do we balance spiritual life with material life? Well, there is two approaches. There is the approach of analysis and the approach of synthesis. Analysis means we separate the two. This is spiritual, this is material. And we need to separate it because there are some activities which nourish our spirituality much more than others. Hmm. So, for example, our meditation, our prayers, our association with spiritually minded people. So, these are what we need to make some time for specifically. So these we can call as spiritual. And then we may have our job, we may have our social obligations, we may have family. We may consider them to be material from one. If they are not directly involved in spirituality, then we can call them as material. So at one level, in analysis we separate the two. But in synthesis, we understand that the divine is not present only in the temple. The divine is not present only in my meditation room. The jurisdiction of the divine extends everywhere. So we see our family responsibilities also as a service to the Lord. That it is by the divine arrangement that I am placed in this particular situation. Even our profession, even our job. You see, we have been given certain abilities, they are gifts, and we are in particular positions. So we serve the divine also through those. That talks about working as a form of worshiping. So karmana tamabhyarcha. So we could put it, so this is synthesis. That spirituality is not just one set of activities. It is, but it's also an awareness that permeates and unites all activities. So another way to understand this is we can say spirituality can have, or bhakti spirituality specifically, can have two different modes. There is reclusive or intensive spirituality, where reclusive means we turn away from the world and focus directly on Krishna. So if I consider this way, I'm here, Krishna is here. So I focus directly on Krishna. And That is reclusive spirituality. So our meditation, our prayer, our spiritual coming in spiritual association, that's like that. But then there is another form of spirituality, that is inclusive spirituality. So for example, this is the world. So then I don't just connect with the world like this, but I connect the world with Krishna. So I engage in the world in the mood of serving Krishna. So that is inclusive spirituality. So there is reclusive spirituality and there is inclusive spirituality. So in that sense, there is no spiritual and material at a higher level of understanding. But there is inclusive, reclusive, and inclusive. Uh, However, having said that, it is important that we give quality time for the reclusive or intensive activities. Because otherwise, while engaging with the world, we can get so consumed that we will not be able to connect that with Krishna. So we need both. Even if somebody is very serious about spiritual life, still they are a part of society. They also have to function in the world. So that inclusive spirituality will be required for everyone. And when we talk about balance, balance is more a principle than a formula. That means that if we are cycling, we can say the key to cycling is a cycle has to be erect, and they can pedal nicely. But if I want to turn right, the cycle has to bend right. However, after I've turned right, if I keep the cycle tilted right still, I'll just go in a circle. Isn't it? So after I tilted right, again I bring in balance. And when I turn left, I turn tilt left. And then again I become straight. So the idea is, the principle is, okay, I want to go there. What is the path? I'll take that and I'll go there. Sometimes stay straight, sometimes tilt left, sometimes tilt right, sometimes tilt left, like that. So similarly, for us, the principle is that I have the inclusive spirituality and the reclusive spirituality. Both in between, I am erect. I stand balanced. So we may decide according to our particular situation, this much time I would like to spend on my spirituality. By spirituality, I mean the reclusive spiritual activities. And this much time I need for my other activities. So now, having decided a broad pattern, say we decide, okay, once a week I can come to the temple. Every day I'll read some wisdom text. Every day I'll spend some time for mantra chanting. Like that, we decide some broad pattern. Then there are times when we may bend one way more, other way more. Say, for example, if there is some job deadline, if there's some family crisis, or there's some family festival or get together, we may need to spend more time over there. At the time when we bend slightly this way. And then, but we don't stay bent that. We'll just go in a circle. So after that particular situation ended, we come back on norms. Sometimes there may be a spiritual festival in the temple. Sometimes there is some opportunity to go on a retreat. And then there is some bigger some opportunity for some association. So we may spend more time in a spiritual setting. So we may went slightly this way. So the key to balance is that we focus on the principle. The principle is that I am serving Krishna in both ways, and inclusive and reclusive. And depending on the particular situation I am in, I may bend this way more, that way more. Does that answer your question? Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
When we start out on a bhakti journey, it's generally most ladies who very ecstatic experiences they have early on, but as we start to keep practicing, sometimes that ecstatic feeling fades. Just wondering if you could share with us some of the pitfalls, the reasons maybe why we go from that euphoric feeling and then sometimes we go away. Sometimes people leave.
Yeah. Okay. So when we start spiritual practices, we explore spiritual, we may feel euphoria initially, ecstasy. But after some time, it seems to decrease. It seems to almost disappear, and that may make some of us have second thoughts about spirituality. So why does that happen? What can we do about it? Well, there are multiple ways of understanding this. I'll talk about three main ways. First is that when we start exploring spirituality, initially there is a lot of external newness to things. And okay, maybe we have new lifestyle. We eat a different kind of food. We wear some different kinds of dress. We are with a different kinds of people. We are doing some different activities. So that external newness accompanied by the spiritual orientation, that itself brings some exhilaration. But at that time, the primary thing that is giving us the exhilaration is the external newness of things. And after some time, those things don't stay externally new. At that time, we need to move towards the internal newness of things. And that journey takes time. So that's why initially what seems very enjoyable may not seem that enjoyable. But the enjoyment is still there. However, it's a little subtler. It's a little uh, it's a little more gradual. It's like if somebody is very, so that's one way of understanding the external newness and the internal newness. Another way of looking at it is that, see, we do something when we experience some benefits from it. Mhm. So initially, when we start spiritual practices, we may find that some of the benefits are dramatic. I used to be agitated, I have become calm. I had this craving, and it just disappeared. And sometimes those give us very strong dose of conviction. Mhm. However, it is relatively easier to experience transformation in gross habits than at a subtler level. So, for example, say I was about 20 years ago, I had severe TB, and a doctor told me I had to take a 1 year treatment. And he said I had severe cough and other things. He told me after 3 months of treatment, as soon as you start taking the medicines, your cough will start decreasing, and in 3 months you start feeling better. But after those 3 months, don't stop the medicine. You have to continue for the next 9 months because the germs are still there inside. And if you stop the medicine, what will happen is you will develop resistant TB, and that's like a dozen times more toxic or far more difficult to cure. So, in one sense, initially when I was taking the medicine, I could see every day I'm taking the medicine, taking the treatment, I'm becoming better. Afterwards, I couldn't see that I was becoming better, and that's why the tendency is, why should I keep taking the medicines? But actually, the medicine is working at a subtler level, and when the germs start disappearing, then the improvement is not so dramatic, it is more incremental. So when you keep taking medicine, we do see the improvement, but it's not on a daily or weekly basis, sometimes monthly, quarterly basis. So like that, initially when the transformation is rapid, we feel, hey, this is working, this is powerful, I want to do it. But afterwards, when we say that, okay, I thought this will go away, this will go away, but it's not going away. I'm still having the same, maybe I still get angry, I still feel jealous, I still have this craving. What's going on? So we may start thinking, is this not working? It is working, but it's working at a subtler level. So that's why we need philosophical conviction. We need a philosophical understanding of what is happening in our life. So the transformation is happening more gradually, but it's happening at a deeper level also. So there is ruchi. Ruchi is taste or joy or experience, and buddhi is intelligence. So if we want to practice spirituality sustainably, we cannot rely on taste alone. We have to rely on our intelligence. And that is why regularly reading wisdom texts or coming not just in the association of spiritually minded people, but hearing spiritual wisdom, that's what gives us the conviction. Yes, the process is still working. So that's the second aspect. And the third is, sometimes we ourselves, as it says, familiarity brings discontent. So sometimes as we keep practicing spirituality, we start devaluing the items of spirituality. We start taking them a bit nonchalantly, a bit casually. So because of that, we may start missing out on the opportunities for spiritual growth. So when we associate spiritually minded people, instead of really taking in the wisdom, taking in the inspiration, yeah, I'm always around spiritually minded people. They're always there. What's the big deal? So when we become nonchalant, then even if we don't become overtly disrespectful, we may just become subtly neglectful. And when that happens, then the stimuli that can aid our spiritual growth, they don't reach our heart, they don't reach our consciousness. So because of that, also we may not grow. It's like, say, uh, a mother is giving medicine to a child, and initially the child is sick, and the child, okay, whatever you want, I'll take it. And the child is recovering. But after one, sometimes my mother starts thinking that, okay, the child is going to take the medicine. The mother just puts the medicine in the child's mouth, and she doesn't pay much attention. So the child just shakes his head, and the medicine just falls off. The mother thinks, every day I'm giving medicine, but the child is not improving. Why is that? Well, giving the medicine is not just a ritual of putting the spoon into the mouth of the child. We have to make sure that the medicine is being taken by the child. So, similarly, when we become nonchalant, what happens is essentially we become ritualistic. So, now rituals themselves are not bad things, but rituals signify something higher. And that higher thing has to be there. The rituals are there in every walk of life. Generally, the word ritual sometimes has a negative connotation. But in one sense, ritual is basically a structured way of behaving. So when we meet people, we may shake hands. But that's a way of basically greeting. It's supposed to convey cordiality, warmth, greeting. But for it to work, I should be shaking hand, but I shouldn't be thinking, I want to stab this person from behind. Then there's no cordiality out there. So we can say that spirit plus ritual becomes spiritual. So spirit plus ritual. So sometimes what happens is we do the ritual, but the spirit is not there. And then it just stays a ritual, it doesn't become spiritual. And that is why also the taste can go down. So if we take care of these three things, stop expecting external newness and start being patient to see inner change, and not let ourselves become ritualistic, then we will find that the joy will still keep coming in our spirituality. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? Yes.
I have 4 questions.
4 questions. Okay. Okay.
You just set up that the ritual is there, but not the spirit. It's not good. But what about the other way around? If the spirit or so-called spirit is there, but the ritual is not there, if someone thinks they claim themselves intuitively, but there's no ritual, then it show back now. But
Okay. So if somebody has only a spirit, but there's no external action to express that spirit, then what about that? Well, there are two different situations when this may happen. In general, it could be because of inability, or it could be because of unwillingness. Mhm. So inability means that somebody wants to do that activity, but they're not able to. Say, for example, in the pandemic was there. Now we want to come to the temple, we want to participate in the programs, but say the place where we stay is far away, and there's a government lockdown, so we can't come. So at that time, the external action is not possible. That's inability. And in such situations, it is said that if we offer our consciousness, in our heart, we want to do that activity, then that is accepted by the divine. Like it's called Manas Puja. So when there is inability, then just maintaining the spirit itself can raise our consciousness, because our intention is there. We would like to do the action. The test is that when the action becomes possible, we do it. But if there is unwillingness, that means that person is looking simply, in one sense, for an excuse to claim to be spiritual without actually committing to the activities that will make them spiritual. The second is self-defeating. So if somebody, so even from if you consider spirituality, to be like a relationship. So a mother may say, I love my child. Yes. But say the mother is sick and she's in the hospital, she has an infectious disease. Now she may not be able to caress and comfort the child and care for the child. But in her heart, she's caring. Mhm. But if the mother says, the child comes back from school, Mommy, I'm hungry. Mother says, I love you. I'm hungry. No, I love you. Just make me some food. No, I love you. Okay. If you love, then express it through action, isn't it? So when there is unwillingness, then what happens is we claim spirit, but we don't do the action. So then that will not help us grow. So we have to consider the context. So if it's due to inability, then that's fine. If it's due to unwillingness, then no. Okay.
You answered two questions. The second was because you said that when the Mahamantras, it's sonic
Yeah.
process. What if someone is mute, they can't speak, or they're deaf, they can't hear?
Oh,
So
thank you.
the same thing.
No, sense and consciousness, whatever way they can. See, it depends. Sometimes even some people, they may not be able to speak audibly, but they can articulate those words in their mind. So whatever is possible for them, that is fine.
And the third one, in the beginning, you were talking about like the relationship with mature things and whatever it is. Can you compare, or can you, and how would you compare a relationship with a material object and a relationship with a person, but without God? You know, like if you're going to work and you have a relationship that you don't include, you know, God, something higher, some mundane or whatever. Could you compare them? Is it right to compare, even though this material object is human beings, their soul? Could you bring that relationship down?
Okay. So if we are relating with a material object and we are relating with a person, but without any spiritual context in it, are the two similar? Well, you can look at it from two different ways. One is the effect on our consciousness, and the other is the effect on the other person's consciousness. So sometimes, if we are comfortable in certain activities, let's suppose somebody is a musician. Thank you. So if we are comfortable with music, we are comfortable with, say, making carpentry. I mean, we like to work alone. So then while we are working, we are relating with an object. We may be thinking about Krishna, we may be hearing something about Krishna, or we just absorb in it. So when we are absorbed in it like that, either our consciousness is not going down, or it may be going up also. It depends. Now, of course, if we are relating with an object and we are feeling lonely and we are feeling abandoned, then that means our consciousness can go down. We need some other people to work with for that reason. Now, when we are working with somebody else, there is a significant difference because their consciousness can affect our consciousness and our consciousness can affect their consciousness, both ways. Objects can also affect us, but objects don't affect us that much, that directly. It's primarily how we interact with the object. You can say in that sense, we are more in control. It's like if there's a bottle of alcohol in our fridge, the bottle of alcohol is not going to walk out of the fridge and come to our mouth, isn't it? So it's how we interact. With respect to people, it's both ways. So in one sense, when we are working with somebody, even if there is no spiritual context over there, but if we are responsible, if we are cultured, if we are sensitive, if we are polite, then that will attract them to some extent. And maybe they will want to know more about us. Hey, I like you. What do you do? And then we may be able to share some spirituality. And even if there's no overt sharing of spirituality, if they just like, oh, you're a Hare Krishna. Oh, nice person. So in general, if after interacting with a spiritually minded person, If somebody appreciate that person, that is also the beginning for their spiritual journey, because they're appreciating something spiritual. So when we are interacting with others, if if we are if we are courteous, if well behaved, we're responsible, we act in a way that they appreciate it. Not that we pander to them. It's not that we have to drink and smoke with them to gain the appreciation, but just we are responsible. We are responsible together, functional people, and that will is also a way to raise their consciousness. So in that sense, that additional opportunity is there when we are interacting with others. However, it is also possible that that person's consciousness may come upon us. Mm. And that person may pressure us, come on, do this, watch this, eat this, drink this. And if we are not firm, then we may succumb to that. And then our consciousness may go down. So the effect on the consciousness is much, much more. Either way. But if you're relating with people, definitely the opportunity is there to raise their consciousness. And if we learn to be, I'll add a little bit to this. That generally, when we are practicing spirituality, if we consider a pendulum, we may have two approaches to our spirituality. One is we will be secretive. I just don't tell anyone about it. What will this person think about me? And maybe they will mock me. Maybe they will dislike me for it. Now, being secretive is a problem because our spirituality is often an important part of our life, and we feel as if I'm living two lives. And it creates a lot of tension. We want to, if somebody calls us and we want to talk spiritually, but we don't want them to know. It creates a lot of tension. Being secretive is not very healthy. But the other extreme could be we might become prescriptive. Prescriptive is, say if we are at a workplace and others are eating meat, we say, I don't want to eat meat. Why? Say, meat eating involves killing of animals. You're making your body into a graveyard. You should give up eating meat. I'll say, who do you think you are to tell me this? See, when we become prescriptive, we alienate others. So if you eat meat, you will go to hell. Say, you go to hell first. I don't care for you. But in between these two is being descriptive. This is what I do, and this is why I do it. So, okay, when I came to know how much pain the animals go through in the meatpacking industry, I felt that I don't want to be a part of it. So when we are that way, we are presenting ourselves, but we are not imposing ourselves. Maybe they'll think, oh, maybe I should not, but they're at least okay. I understand where this person comes from. So that way, what will happen is we give them an opportunity to rise upward if they want, but we don't impose it on them. So then I think that is quite a healthy way to interact with others. Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
Oh, that's all right.
Oh, you can ask when you come back to me. Okay.
Oh, okay. Over measuring lots of different things, lots of different ways, and in there I've established in some ways quite a comfortable relationship with things that I do believe in and things that I value, my core values. And I'm curious, and practicing bhakti and connecting with Krishna, when really, forgive me if I say this wrong, is it Bhagavad Gita? The Bhagavad Gita. If I come across, or if one comes across a verse or an area that doesn't resonate with their values, what is yours and what is the practice of bhakti? What is the stance on that?
Okay, yeah. So if we, while practicing bhakti, come across some points that don't resonate with us, that we can't accept, for example. So what do we do? Yeah, I think that's a challenge which we'll face throughout. Even now, after 25 years of practicing spirituality, I encounter points. How do I make sense of this? It is always there. So my approach broadly is threefold. First is I don't let anything come in the way of my spiritual growth. So this wisdom text is meant to be aid in my spiritual growth. So if something within that is impeding my spiritual growth, then let me suspend judgment right now. I won't let that become a hurdle for me. Okay. So I will keep moving forward. That's the first approach. But then I still have to deal with that. So how do I deal with that? Then it's good to find some like-minded spiritual teachers, spiritual guides, who can whom we can ask questions to. Now, in general, we can ask to anybody who is well read in that book, but different people also approach wisdom text differently. Different people approach spirituality differently. That's why we need like-minded. Like-minded means they understand where we are coming from, and when they answer, it makes sense to us. There's some people answer, and their answer leaves more questions than answers with us, isn't it? So we need to find that, and sometimes we have to be patient. That's why in the spiritual journey we have many gurus, we have many guides, and we seek a proper understanding in like-minded association. The second thing, and third thing is that sometimes there are some things which we may just, even after seeking guidance from others and our own deliberation, sometimes they may just not make sense to us still. So in that situation, we can just put it in brackets, and maybe in future I'll understand it. So sometimes we all come from particular backgrounds, and in scripture also there are everything in a wisdom text. For example, everything in the Bhagavad Gita is not the teaching of the Bhagavad Gita. In scripture, there are sections that are descriptive, and there are sections that are prescriptive. Descriptive means this was how it was done at the time when this text was spoken. Prescriptive means this is what we have to do, or this is what we should do. So everything in scripture is not prescriptive. Some of it is simply descriptive. So now I have if you had a PowerPoint, I would explain this. Let me try to visualize this. So this is the time domain. The Bhagavad Gita was spoken thousands of years ago. Now we are here in 20th century, 21st century now, 2022. So now what the Bhagavad Gita teaches is actually timeless. However, the timeless was spoken at a particular time. And naturally, it will address the cultural context of that time. So now there will be in that message something which will be specific to that context, and there will be something which is beyond that context. Just like if somebody reads Shakespeare now Shakespeare is writing in English, but his English is quite different from today's English. It takes some effort to understand it. Sometimes some words can have very different meanings. So I think in Britain, when there was a great fire and there was a big palace which was demolished. I think the Queen's Palace was demolished, and the Queen's Palace was built again. The Queen wrote to the architect. He says, "I saw the palace. Your work is awful." And now, actually, around 400 years ago, the word awful has the same meaning today as awesome. So it is appreciation, and it's preserved in the museum as a note of appreciation. Your work is awful. So awful there means that which fills one with awe. But that is not the meaning we use it today. So it is, the point I'm making is there is the timeless, which when it comes in the domain of time, there will be some things which will be specific to that context. And there are many things which are not specific to that context. So we may decide that this doesn't make sense to me right now. So let me put in brackets and focus on that which is prescriptive and not get caught in that which is descriptive. Okay.
Can I follow on to that?
Yeah.
Then how do you suggest one applies that now? For example, there are very brief viewings, things about the masculine and feminine that don't sit entirely right with me. So how would you suggest in a world where the relationship between masculine and feminine is so different to thousands of years ago, like how do you specify the timelessness
Okay.
of this time?
Yeah. I think that is the statements about the gender dynamics and gender roles.
Oh, it's a lot more, but yeah, that's an example.
Yeah. So how do we apply those dynamics? How do we apply what is, say, given in scripture now? See, in every tradition, there will be liberals and there will be conservatives. So conservatives basically want to preserve or conserve what is good from the past. Whereas if you consider liberals, they want to liberate or include those who are left out from the past, or those who are, so both can be well intentioned. What we have got, so if the conservatives become too strong, then in preserving the past, they may become disconnected from the present. They may alienate the present. On the other hand, the liberals become too strong, then in accommodating the present, they may reject the past and all the wisdom or whatever we could get from the past. So we need both. And naturally, some people will be more liberal, some people will be more conservative. As research is going on in this brain science, especially, it seems that it's almost like a brain orientation. Some people tend to be more liberal, some people tend to be more conservative. And every tradition has a dynamic, and different people can find their place within a tradition. So some people may say that to be spiritual, we need to have gender roles similar to how they were in the past. And yes, some people might be able to work that way. But that, if we could say that within the hierarchy of spiritual teachings, if we say consider what Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, he says at the end of our life, we need to remember him. That remembrance is a personal remembrance out of love. If we remember the divine at the time of our death, we attain the divine. Krishna is not saying that if you have lived a life according to a particular gender role, only then you can attain the divine. So there are primary, secondary, tertiary tenets within the script, within the Bhagavad Gita or other wisdom texts. So some people may say that, yeah, we need to replicate those gender roles. Now maybe they have an audience today, maybe they don't. But the others, they'll understand that the point is to raise human consciousness. So to raise human consciousness. Now, how males and females, for example, should interact in today's world so that both can raise their consciousness. That is something which has to be individually as well as socially negotiated. So, say every society, no matter how liberal it is, it requires some guidelines, some boundaries, some rules. Maybe in the past, you could say the male-female interactions were primarily governed through marriage. Now we may not have that, but that doesn't mean we don't have any rules. For example, one cardinal rule today is consent. Anything which is non-consensual is a serious crime, isn't it? So now, between marriage and consent, are there any other guidelines? Yeah, there are. But what are they? Sometimes, if you travel across different countries, in different countries, how when two people are talking to each other, how close they stand to each other. There's a difference. So suppose some person is from a country where two people stand very close to each other, and the other person is from a country where people stand far away from each other. So what happens is the first person keeps coming close, the other person keeps moving backward. The two are talking, what is going on? So for the two of them to talk, both of them have to negotiate, and what is the comfortable distance for both of them? They have to find that. So I'd say that for most of us, we will have to individually and socially negotiate and decide how best the genders can interact, how in general human beings can interact, so that we all can raise our consciousness. So there is a lot of room for individual adaptability in that. Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
So okay, last question.
So in kind of the beginning part of your talk, you talked about how there is a desire for a relationship
Hmm.
Then there's the process or desire. It's the fruit you get from the relationship. So in spiritual life, we have sadhana, and that's described as a process of becoming attached to Krishna. So if someone doesn't feel very attached to Krishna at the beginning, they practice anyway. Will they become attached every time, or do we have to develop that attachment first?
Okay. So if one does not have attachment to Krishna, then will they develop it in time, or do they need it right in the beginning? It's not a 1-0 thing. It is, we can say, we have some reason why we are practicing Krishna Bhakti. Maybe it could be that everybody in our community is practicing. That's why we're practicing. And then we can say, no, I like my community, that's why I'm practicing. Maybe our parents told us to do it. Maybe we born in a family like that. Our parents are doing it, that's why we want to do it. Now we want to please our parents, that's why we do it. That's okay. At one level, however we start, that is fine. And eventually, if we practice bhakti, if we keep doing the practices of bhakti, that attraction to Krishna will manifest. It will increase. Now, having said that, it is at least we need to have the desire for that attraction. If we don't even have the desire for that attraction, then our interactions will become very mechanical. So it's like sometimes we are talking with a person, and the person looking at their watch, the person looking here, looking there. That person is giving us a dozen signals that they just want to leave. Now we may have something very important to talk with them, but it's easy to get annoyed, natural to get annoyed. And eventually we say, okay, if you're not interested, then I won't force you. You can go. So maybe that person is really busy and that person has to go somewhere urgent. But then they can say, right now I have only a few minutes. Can you talk more later? So the idea is in a relationship, if one person just doesn't want to be there, then that relationship can't grow. Now, it could be that one person may be much more interested in the relationship, the other person may be less interested. But the other person at least needs to have some interest for the relationship to grow. So, in one sense, Krishna as the indwelling divinity is always there within our hearts. So, Krishna is interested in a relationship with us. Now, it's like we are meeting someone, but if we just don't want to be there in the meeting, now, we may not like that person. So, between liking that person and disliking that person, there is a space. Okay, I want to get to know this person. Maybe I don't like them right now, but maybe I'll find something likable about them. So I'm at least open to it. I'm curious. So that openness is also there. Then we may find something likable in that person. And then that interaction will lead to a growth of affection. So when we are practicing bhakti, we are actually in one sense bringing ourselves in the presence of Krishna, or we are invoking the presence of Krishna. So when we are doing that, it's like we are meeting a person, we should want to be there. Maybe that's not the place where we want most important thing for us. But okay, right now I'm here, I want to be here. So in that sense, if we are present, not just physically present, but present with our attention, present with our intention, present with our consciousness, then that Krishna activity will lead to attraction toward Krishna. Okay. Thank you. Shall we stop? So, thank you very much for your thoughtful questions. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu.